Hello, everybody. My name is Alan, and it's that time again. Let's talk metal. Tonight, we're going to talk about three really good unsung albums of pure US heavy metal from the 1980s. Some of these you may have heard of, some of them you may not. Hey, you get to check out some new stuff. That is always cool. As I usually do, I'm going to focus on some albums that are, I think, a bit underappreciated. They're bands that maybe didn't go very far, they were on small labels, didn't last very long, but they did manage to leave at least one really nice slab of heavy metal history in their wake, and I think they deserve a little bit of attention. So let's check some of those out. Got three offerings tonight, and the first one is sort of a local band from down here in the South. I want to start off tonight with a South Carolina band called Carnage. Carnage was from Columbia, South Carolina. They released one album. This came out back in '86. Is on a small label. The record label released a few other heavy metal things as well. The Christian metal band Commandment had a single put out on the label. And they put out a couple more items for Carnage in the subsequent years. There was supposedly a 3-track EP that recycles some tracks off of this, and also a 7-inch single that also just recycles some tracks. The label reportedly had some iffy business dealings, and the records on that label have become pretty hard to find. It doesn't seem like they were ever circulated very wide or had really great distribution matters. But the Carnage album is really, really good. It's a relatively hard one to find, but thankfully it has been reissued in recent years. Let's see, it was Heaven and Hell Records put it out on CD in around 2017. So you can get the full album with some bonus tracks, which is always cool. And they actually even included with something like, first 100 customers, I don't know, got a refrigerator magnet with the album artwork on it, which I think is actually kind of a cool little throw in. I'd rather have something like this than just a random sticker or something like that. So hey, nice marketing gig. I liked it enough that I found a copy that had the magnet with it. But enough squawking about the band. Let's actually check out what they sound like. So here's a little bit of the album opener, which is a killer song called Barbarian Queen.
Cross the burning sands of the Middle Ages, rose the barbarian queen!
There's a little bit of Barbarian Queen. From that very first few seconds when he's just kind of, barking out with all that reverby, echoey effect, across the sounds of the Middle Ages roars the Barbarian Queen. That's just going to be a pretty fun album. And yeah, a lot of the songs on it have that very punky vibe. It's pretty fast, pretty simple, has a good rumbly low end to it though at the same time. Very fun album. A lot of the songs have that kind of crash bang wallop apocalyptic vibe about them. Some of the songs though have a little bit more of an atmospheric bent. It's not just a straight ahead all barrels blazing and you're done album. There's a few tracks like the Astral Inn that are little more kind of freaky. It's almost like Astral Inn reminds me almost a little bit of Hotel California if like you're on bad acid in the middle of a Wes Craven movie or something weird. But yeah, it's got several other really good rumbly ones like Killers and Look at Yourself. It's a relatively short album. There's about 7 tracks, only lasts a little over 30 minutes, but it is a cool listen. If you like that sort of raw, dirty, sort of sped up Motorhead kind of vibe to the music, it's a good one to check out. And again, the reissue is still pretty easy to track down, so it's definitely worth a listen. As I said, the band didn't really have much else going on after that. They had, the subsequent pieces of vinyl put out. The tracks selected for the EP and the 7-inch are kind of odd choices. They're definitely not the faster, really, fist pumping headbanging numbers at all. Which again, you kind of wonder why the label would select those tracks to keep recycling and re-recycling. Some folks have wondered, yeah, exactly, what the label was thinking and why they were putting out, the same tracks over and over when it wasn't even the best material from the band. But regardless, it's a cool album, so check it out if you ever get the chance. Okay, let's move to kind of the completely other end of the spectrum from this sort of very raw, dirty, almost punkish kind of metal to something that's got a much cleaner sound. And we're going to look at New York's Matacopus. Uh, this is a pretty cool album called Coming Out Ahead. As you can see, it's got actually a little bit of work put into the graphics and such for 1987, and you get the vibe from the back that these guys are going for something that's going to be a little more digestible. But it still has a very good heavy metal sound to it. This is not a glam album. It's not a hair album. It is very solid, straightforward 80s US metal. Let's take a listen to a track, a little snippet here from a second song on side A, I think. It's called Thoughts.
People you see, people you meet, living their lives in total discreet. The ups and downs and turnarounds never seem to knock them down. But they will survive and stay alive. Their thoughts are changing this game. Success is the object of their ways. Overrule their minds all the time that they are trying to break away. Can't seem to make it clear. Days that seem never ending. Nights that are never there.
All right, there's a sampling of what Matacopus has to offer. For small kind of independent release and the band's only output, it's got a very good production to it. Songwriting is very solid throughout the whole album, and that's a good word for it. It's very solid, very consistent throughout. They don't stray towards power ballads or anything that's too commercial friendly. They don't stray into anything that's going to be a head splitting, crushingly heavy or anything like that either. They fall in that in between realm where it's just good, solid, heavy metal. Reminds me a little bit of things like the Black Diamond LP, although this has a much, much better production to it. It's also just similar to some of the other very guitar-driven acts, like Mad Hatter out of Texas, although Mad Hatter's a little more energetic, a little more upbeat. Uh, this was, again, similar to something like, Mox Nix, although Mox Nix had a tendency to lean into the MTV stylings more. Matacopus doesn't really do that very much. They kind of stay right in that center lane and put out a very solid album. If you like guitar-driven, just no frills, good vocals, nice songs, Matacopus is one to check out. It's an album that is kind of rare and kind of isn't. which may sound a little weird. The deal is copies for a long time were a little hard to come by, but a vinyl dealer did track down the band at some point. You got some quantity of unsold copies, and I don't know if those still trickle out onto the market every now and then, or if that supply finally got exhausted at some point. But you could find this, at least a few copies would turn up each year on eBay for a long time. And, as such, it could usually be got for a pretty reasonable price. I don't think it's been reissued. I'm not aware of one, at least. If it has, somebody please let me know in the comments down below. Again, the musicians did not put out anything else. They didn't move on to other projects to my knowledge, but they left behind this one really cool album. It's one that, even though I've owned it for years, sometimes it's easy to overlook when I'm going through the shelf. It's just like, maybe not. But every time I stop and play, it's just like, that's always better than I remember it. Really good album. All right, just one more that we're going to look at tonight. This is kind of the really obscure one for the evening. It is from the US via way of Germany, and it is a band called Shadow and an album called Iron Umbrella. Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to point out about the Matacopus album before I moved on. If you're wondering what the heck the name means, it's the first two letters from each band member's last name spliced together into a word. So, yeah, it's not like a weird foreign word or anything. They just made a word out of their names, which, hey, it kind of worked. All right. I knew there was something else I was trying to remember to say about Matacopus. So, with that one wrapped up, now let's talk about Shadow and this weird titled for an album, Iron Umbrella. I do like the cool bat logo thing they have going on there. I mentioned this one comes from the US, but via way of Germany. The deal with this one is that it was put out in 1989 on a German label, but it was recorded by Americans. And what happened was these were guys who were members of the military. They're in if I remember right, the 3rd Infantry, and were stationed in Germany. This was still late Cold War era, so we still had a presence there. And wasn't necessarily a whole lot going on, I guess. So they formed a band and wrote some material. They also functioned under the name Brain Damage for a period of time. But when they put out the album, it was under the name Shadow. Now, there are a couple of other US metal bands from the 1980s that used the name Shadow. It's not exactly the most unique name, so you might come across a 7-inch here or a demo there, but those are by other acts. Shadow did supposedly record a few other songs here or there, but this is the only thing I know of that ever really got issued. As you can imagine, it's a pretty hard item to come by. They didn't press a lot of copies. I would assume it was essentially sort of a for-fun side project while the guys were stationed overseas. So it's not a situation where you're really thinking, hey, we're going to take this band and start playing, giant arenas across America, because we're several thousand miles away from America. Also interesting is that for a 1989 release, this still has a very straightforward heavy metal sound to it. It's not, thrash or glam influenced in the least. And if you don't want to take my word for it, let's take a listen to one of the songs. Here's a clip from, the title is a little unfortunate. It's called the BD Boogie. Anytime you see the word boogie in the name of a song, you wonder if you really should pick that one. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But actually, I like this one. I think it's a cool tune, so let's check a little bit of it out.
Carry on. The voices in my mind are waiting.
right, there you go. A little bit of Shadow. And yeah, it's a pretty good, solid little record. Again, it's a relatively short one. It's got 6 songs, well, technically 7, but has a very short runtime, a little over 30 minutes. It gets listed in some places as an EP, though I consider anything over 5 songs to be too long for an EP by traditional recording standards. Modern albums, of course, may have 2 songs that last 70 minutes. Not talking about that kind of stuff. Regardless of how you want to classify it, it's a pretty solid heavy metal album. It's not going to reinvent the wheel. It's probably never going to be anybody's favorite album of all time, but when you consider the circumstances that these are just guys serving in the military together, randomly get stationed in Germany together, and have enough time on the side to be playing around and come up with the money to get a record pressed, yeah, I think it's a really nice outing. It is a tough one to find. And something I'll mention because it turned up online several years ago. There was somebody posting on a sort of heavy metal rarities message board that this album was actually extremely easy to find overseas, and they were claiming that they had seen copies of it around Germany all the time, and it was never more than like $10 or $20, and people were stupid to pay more money than that for it. And that's a load of crap. Nothing about that was true. The person who posted that, was basically trolling the audience there. The record sold for a lot more than that at the time, and it was on that person's want list. They had mentioned that they didn't have it, and so it's like, wait, this record is rare, and people pay a lot for it, and you don't have a copy, and you're claiming you see it all over the place. But why don't you have a copy? Why aren't you not buying these and flipping these and making what? You don't need the extra cash? Nothing about the post made any sense. It was quickly debunked. I mention it simply because the post may still be floating around out there online somewhere. If somebody stumbles across it and finds it, they could mistakenly think that, oh, this is an easy record to find. Oh, this is a cheap record, and there's copies of it all over Europe still. No, that's not the case. Cool album. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, I don't think it's ever been reissued. The band did record a little more music here and there. They got back together, played a few just for fun reunion gigs, but I don't think they ever actually put out anything else. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. All right, so there you go. 3 sort of under the radar classics of U.S. heavy metal from the 1980s. Now it's time to talk metal in the comments down below. What do you think of these? Anything catch your fancy? Do you love that opening to Barbarian Queen, or is it way too cheesy for you? Might be for some folks. Any other albums along the lines of Matacopus, those cool guitar-driven, nice-sounding albums that you think deserve a shout-out? If so, talk about them in the comments down below. Let me know what things I may be missing. You can probably come up with some things I've never gotten a chance to check out, and I'd love to do so. But you got to point me in the right direction. All right, folks, that's enough for tonight. So until next time, everybody stay safe, and as always, keep banging your head.